The BRICS New Development Bank Vice President Leslie Maasdorp says the bank is already using different currencies, even though the US dollar is still a major trading currency. Maasdorp says the bank will continue to assist South Africa as the country continues to deal with energy challenges. He spoke to our SABC News international editor, Sophie Mokoena, as the bank celebrates 8 years since it was established.
But these countries came together and injected $10 billion of equity, $10 billion of paid-in capital, $2 billion from each of the 5 countries, and that provided the initial capital for the bank. In total, the bank has a subscribed capital base of $50 billion, and this enabled us to very quickly, after 2015, to start approving projects. We started in 2016 with the first 5 renewable energy projects, 1 in each of the 5 BRICS countries. So the last 8 years have been a really sort of steady run of expansion and growth in the bank. I would say the first 5 years in particular have been one of establishing our credentials, obtaining a very high credit rating, establishing our credentials in the bond markets by issuing debt both in local currency as well as in US dollars. And then, of course, in 2020, the bank played a very critical role, Sophie, in helping our member countries fight the COVID pandemic. So 2020 to 2022 was a very difficult period for the global economy and BRICS in particular, but the bank played a very decisive role in helping our countries manage the pandemic. Last year, again, was also very challenging, as you know, because of geopolitics and sanctions that have been imposed on one of our member countries, but the bank has come through those challenges successfully.
How did you manage to continue with the work during the pandemic?
One of the key features of the bank is our cloud-based IT infrastructure, meaning that the bank was able to function quite seamlessly because most of our infrastructure is not located on servers physically inside the bank. It's cloud-based IT infrastructure, so we could very smoothly adapt to a remote working environment. So in 2020, many of our staff worked from India, from Brazil, from South Africa, and so on. And then during 2021, we managed to return to head office because COVID was largely under control here in China. But during the initial phase of COVID, we were able to conduct all of our activities, identify new projects, disburse loans on existing projects, issue debt in the international and the local capital markets. We're able to do all of that using remote locations.
Let's look at 8 years on. Even though you had those challenges, there are projects that you were able to support. Can you perhaps highlight some of these important projects? I mean, when you look at South Africa in particular, the issue of energy crisis, the bank had indicated that it was going to assist South Africa. Can you take us through those important projects that you have funded?
Thank you very much. As you know, the state-owned enterprises in particular are very key clients of the bank. We started very early on after the bank's establishment to work very closely with Eskom. We have been working very closely in providing financial support in the form of loans to Development Bank of Southern Africa, who in turn have funded a number of independent power producers to help with the generation of new green power. Similarly with the Industrial Development Corporation. And then importantly, we've also worked with Transnet. The bank provided a loan for the upgrading and the expansion of the Durban container terminal, which, as you know, is the main port that provides inputs and exports for South Africa. In addition, we have also have a 7 billion rand loan to South African National Roads Agency, which over the next few years will help with the expansion and upgrading of South Africa's rail network. And then importantly, Sophie, as you might know, in 2020, the bank provided support to South Africa to help fight COVID. We provided an addition of $2 billion in total to South Africa. The first $1 billion was spent largely on fighting the pandemic through additional financial resources for protective gear, for ventilators and so on. And the further $1 billion played a big role in the presidential employment stimulus program, where we provided those support to those grants that the government put in place. So during COVID, we played a very decisive role in assisting the government during a time when financial resources were scarce because the economy went into decline. Currently, our big focus is on energy and helping the country recover from the energy crisis. But as you know, it will take time for new power to be built on a sustainable basis, and for the grid, especially the transmission network, to be upgraded. And that's an area where we're hoping to play a bigger role in.
Are you also funding the renewable projects?
Yes, indeed. We have funded renewable energy projects largely through the Development Bank of Southern Africa. We will continue to fund the energy program in South Africa. South Africa, as you know, is a medium to long-term process of moving towards a more balanced energy mix, if you like. We have more than 88% of our energy right now is generated by coal-fired power stations, and that number of renewable energy is continuing to increase. But even as we generate more power, whether it be solar power or wind power, we need to put more resources into upgrading the grid, meaning the transmission network. And that is an area where the bank is hoping to play a bigger role in going forward. And then finally, also battery storage is a significant technology that is now being deployed to store, especially renewable energy, because as you know, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. So one must have an ability to store the power generated so that you can then use it when it is required during sort of peak hours. So we will be looking also to generate or to make use of the benefits, if you like, across BRICS countries, because some of the major battery storage global companies are located here in China. So we want to have more cross-fertilization between South Africa, India, South Africa, China, South Africa, Brazil, and so on.
What were the challenges that you had to deal with since the start of the war?
I think firstly, as you know, the bank operates in US dollars, and therefore the bank has to be fully compliant with international restrictions that exist with respect to deployment of dollars to sanctioned entities. So the New Development Bank, like all other multilateral banks like Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, the World Bank, and so on, we all observe relevant international restrictions. So in 2022, the bank had initially experienced some funding challenges, but we have largely overcome that. Now in 2023, beginning of this year, the bank was able to have its international credit rating affirmed as a AA+ with Standard & Poor's, and we also had the negative outlook, which Fitch put in place last year. We had that changed upwards towards stable. And then also in April this year, a few months ago, the bank was able to raise a green bond, $1.25 billion of new funding that will be utilized for new green projects throughout the member countries. And then finally, also a few weeks ago, the bank raised 8.5 billion renminbi here in the Chinese bank bond market, which that is roughly about $1.3 billion. So we are now back in full sort of fundraising mode. So the challenges of 2022 have largely been dealt with.
Is the bank looking at this debate that is raging on in terms of how you deal with the dollar as a trading currency?
I think it's important to highlight that the bank's currency in which we operate, our capital that we receive from our member countries is in dollars. About 70% of our loans that we do are in dollars. And the bank has a commitment. Since 2015, we've had this commitment to increase the use of our local currencies of our member countries. So here in China already, we do almost half of our projects in renminbi, meaning we raise renminbi in the bond market, which is the local currency, and then we on-lend in that currency. We are on the verge now of finalizing a program that we will list on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where we will raise in the next few weeks a bond in rand in South Africa, and we will use the proceeds of those the rands to deploy on the projects that we have in South Africa. One of the projects, for example, that's denominated in local currency in rand is the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Phase 2 that we have approved and that we're in the process of, that we will be disbursing on. So the bank is committed to deploy more local currency financing going forward. At some stage in future, as you know, our shareholders at the level of the BRICS countries are discussing the approach for the future, because a number of countries at their level, they're starting to trade also in their local currencies. But as far as the bank is concerned, we will be continuing to lend in US dollars and also in South African rand, in Brazilian real, in Indian rupee, Chinese renminbi, and so on.
There is interest from other countries to join the bank. Can you briefly tell us, as we speak now, how many countries are part of this institution, and also other countries who have indicated that they want to be part of this BRICS Bank?
It's important to highlight, Sophie, that way back in 2014, when the Articles of Agreement of the bank were signed, it was always the intention of the shareholders for us to create a global bank anchored in the emerging markets. So over the last number of years, we put in place all the enabling policies and procedures to be able to start the membership expansion. During the COVID period in 2021, we had already a number of countries join. Egypt, as you know, have joined the bank. United Arab Emirates have joined the bank. Bangladesh is now a shareholder. Uruguay is in the process of joining. And you would have seen in the public domain that Saudi Arabia have also expressed interest. There's a large number of emerging markets that are interested in joining the bank, because the bank is an additional source of financing for infrastructure. Many of these countries are already members of the World Bank, they're members of African Development Bank, they're members of Asia Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, and so on. So we are just an additional source of financing, because we are a very strong green institution committed to help our countries with the green transition, and many of these countries have a need and a gap in terms of financing for infrastructure. So in the next number of years, the process of membership expansion is going to continue and going to accelerate. In fact, the new president of the bank, President Dilma Rousseff, has already indicated that this will be one of the strong strategic priorities that she will devote a lot of attention to. So we are very confident that over the next year, 2, 3, we will see more and more countries join our bank, which also, as you know, will have the strong positive impact that it will bring in new, fresh capital for the institution.
And finally, looking ahead, South Africa will be hosting the BRICS Summit. What can we expect from the bank in terms of perhaps announcements going forward, projects that you intend to support in different parts of the world, or perhaps within your member countries?
I think with regards to the bank and its involvement in the BRICS Summit, we will certainly showcase the work that we are doing and have been doing in South Africa. Our aim is to strengthen our pipeline of projects in South Africa. South Africa, as you know, because of the slow growth trajectory, the government has a strong commitment to invest in infrastructure to enhance the productive capacity of the economy. So whether it's investment in new rail and upgrading of our rail infrastructure, investment in new energy, investment in the road infrastructure, investment in water, in all of these areas I've just mentioned, the bank is active in, whether it be with SANRAL, with TCTA, with Eskom, with Transnet, and so on. So we will try to give prominence to the work we are doing in all of those sectors during the BRICS Summit.